While walking along the shoreline of Japan, one of the things you might expect to see are wooden fishing boats bobbing happily along the waves, trawling up all kinds of fish and crab and squid to be used in the many seafood dishes of the country. What you might not expect to see, looming out of the early morning haze, are primitive boats filled with the dead. But believe it or not, over the past 6 years, this is exactly what the coast of Japan has had to deal with. Along the western coast, hundreds of the boats have been washing up. On board those boats are skeletons. Some are partially decomposed, others are completely decomposed. With some, only the heads remain, with others, only the torso and the limbs remain. The boats themselves are small wooden structures that appear to be both very old and very heavy. The engines of the machines are heavily rusted and obsolete, and the navigation hubs of the boats have no high-tech features like a GPS navigation system. On the deck of the boat, you will usually find a few fishing hooks alongside the rotting bodies of the dead, all of which are dressed in civilian clothes. The bodies all seem to be from men, but are usually so decomposed that being certain is impossible. On some of the boats, you might find the words Korean People's Army in Korean Hangul. This is the military force behind North Korea, and the tattered North Korean flags found on some of the other boats lead even more weight to people believing that these craft did indeed come directly from North Korea. The ghost ships started first appearing in 2011. In this first year, there were 65 boats, then 47 in 2012, and 80 in 2013, followed by 64 in 2014. As the boats arrive unexpectedly off the coast of Japan, the crews are gathered and taken to nearby crematoriums where they are burned, and then the ashes are taken to Buddhist compounds. Believe it or not, the shores of Japan are well known for having other strange things wash up. There is Chinese garbage carried across the ocean from strong winds. There are bodies that drift onto the beaches after suicides are made at many of the cliff faces that surround the Japanese coastline. But the fleets of ghost ships rolling in from the oceans are harder to explain. At first, it was speculated that the people within the boats could be defectors from North Korea who were trying to escape the clutches of Kim Jong-un and his regime. But the idea was quickly swept away. It would have been easier for potential dissenters of the regime to make their runaway efforts lead to South Korea rather than Japan. It is much easier to get to South Korea by boat than it is the Japanese coast. In the end, the most obvious answer for these unfortunate castaways lies with a push toward the fish market. Defectors have said that fishing is one of the most lucrative industries within North Korea's borders, and around the time more and more of these ghost ships started showing up, there was a huge push towards the fishing industry by the regime. The North Korean government sets out fishing quotas for each fishing crew, and apparently if they can exceed those quotas, any extra fish becomes property of the person who caught it. In other words, becoming a fisherman is a way to ensure that your family is fed in times where things are much tougher for standard North Korean citizens, and it is likely that this incentive pushed many to go way out of their depth. Since 1995, North Korean citizens have been able to register their own boats as military fishing vessels. So they work through harsh winters in order to bring in as much fish as possible for their hungry families. However, the issue for many of North Korea's technology is that it is severely out of date, and the fishing boats are no different. The boats are equipped with rusted and old engines that often give out completely. With the fierce competition in the fishing sector, boats are forced to stray further and further out into open waters. With their weak engines, sometimes boats get caught in currents and are unable to fight against them. Eventually, men who are on those boats which have been set adrift will die due to starvation, thirst, or exposure to the elements. And eventually, those boats filled with the dead drift to Japan. But perhaps the strangest part of this story is the fact that some of these men have missing body parts, up to and including the head. Could something else be happening that experts have not yet considered? In all the years that boats have gone missing, Kim Jong-un has congratulated his fisheries for a job well done. Never once has he seemed regretful for the potential hundreds of lives lost at sea. And while this could just be another quirk of Kim Jong-un's apparent sociopathic nature, what if these lives were not lost at all? Could it be that groups of men have been killed by the regime and then sent out to the ocean instead of getting a burial? Are body parts missing because of cannibalism after hunger sets in after being at sea for so long? Or could something more sinister than anything I've talked about today actually be happening out there in the sea? Could North Korea be sending these bodies infected with some sort of plague to infect the Japanese people? In truth, we will likely never know. Not unless Kim Jong-un or someone else speaks up about the tragedy.